This is the 5-minute podcast review for Friday, December 23, 2016. Yep, it's the almost Christmas Eve edition. And around this time of year, routines can change a bit. You might have less time to listen to podcasts or maybe a bit more time. So the 5 podcasts this week are ones that you might want to subscribe to, but they also work as podcasts where you can just scroll down the episode list and pick off the highlights. A good way to maybe shake up your Christmas holiday playlist with something different. The first podcast is a good example of this. It's from the Slate group, the online magazine, and it's called Working. Each episode focuses on a different profession and interviews someone in that profession to find out what exactly it is they do all day. Basically, you take a walk in their shoes. It could be anything from a 747 pilot to a porn star. But my tip is to pick a few of the more seemingly ordinary professions and surprise yourself by how there's much more to the job than it might seem on the surface. I think the episode on being a club doorman is a good example of this. So take a scroll down the episode list of Slate's Working. On to podcast number 2, and remember, no need to take notes. You should find active links to all podcasts on your screen. I know that different apps display the links in different places, but if you look around, you should find them pretty easily. So podcast number 2 is The Inquiry. The concept behind The Inquiry is simple. Each episode takes a current issue from the news and has 4 relevant experts break it down for us. A great recent example was on Aleppo in Syria. Aleppo is in the news pretty much every day at the moment, but how many of us really know anything about Aleppo, its history, or why it's such a strategic city, not only now in the war in Syria, but as it has been for centuries? Take 22 minutes to listen to this podcast and you'll understand a whole lot more about Aleppo than you do now. And while you're there, check out the many other episodes of The Inquiry. You're pretty much guaranteed to find more than a few interesting and informative episodes. That's The Inquiry. Podcast number 3 this week is the Ezra Klein Show. So Ezra Klein is the founder and editor-in-chief of the Vox website, which bills itself as explanatory journalism. That is, it's more about explaining issues rather than just being about first at breaking the latest news stories. And this thinking seems to underpin Ezra Klein's podcast. It's essentially an interview-based podcast like many others, but Ezra Klein is able to get some very high-caliber guests on his show to talk about or explain subjects in their area of expertise. For example, there's a great interview with Bill Gates talking about innovation, including in the areas of clean energy generation and artificial intelligence. It's a great chance to hear firsthand Bill Gates' thinking on these subjects and on the future in general. Other guests on episodes this past year include Atul Gawande, Arianna Huffington, Moby, Malcolm Gladwell, and Hillary Clinton, just to name a few. There's around 50 episodes up at the moment, so check out the Ezra Klein Show and see if you can't find something interesting to listen to there. Podcast number 4 is More or Less, and it's a podcast where each episode takes a common claim and runs the actual statistics against it to see how the claim stacks up. For example, a recent episode tests the commonly thought idea that 2016 has been a bad year for celebrity deaths. Another episode checks the recent media reports that renewable energy capacity has overtaken coal in the UK. Another tests the claim that there are more mobile phones in Uganda than there are light bulbs. Often the answers aren't that straightforward. There's a lot of it depends in many of the answers, which is probably why the podcast is called More or Less. But I think ultimately this is its real value. The interest and the learning is in the dissection of the simplistic headline claims to get at the much more nuanced reality. So have a look down the More or Less episode list and you might find some great ammunition for Christmas dinner table arguments. Shifting gears to end on a music podcast brings us to podcast number 5, Sodajerker on Songwriting. So first things first, Sodajerker is the name of a songwriting duo from Liverpool in the UK. And the story I read was that the way this podcast came about is that Sodajerker, the songwriting duo, were looking for an excuse or a way to meet and talk to their songwriting heroes. And so the podcast was created as a way to do this, and it certainly seems to have delivered for them. In each episode, the Sodajerker team interview a songwriter about the way they go about their craft, often going into the stories behind the writing of some of their best-known songs, and in fact, some of the best-known songs in the world. Running down the episode list, you'll see names like Jimmy Webb, Mike Stoller, Albert Hammond, Carol Bayesaya, Neil Finn, Joan Armatrading, Paul Simon, the list goes on. And if some of those names don't mean anything to you, you'll definitely know their songs. And what I like about these interviews is that they are more like insider conversations where very quickly the celebrity songwriter realises they're not just doing a stock mainstream media interview, but are speaking to fellow songwriters. So you get that real look behind the curtains kind of insight, which I always think is fascinating. So go and have a look at the episode list of Sodajerker on songwriting, and I'm pretty sure you'll find some holiday season listening there. Well, that's it. 5 episodes in around 5 minutes, and I'll be back next week with the almost New Year's Eve episode and 5 more podcasts. Thanks for listening.